In March, the world's largest asset manager told investors they could not have $1.2 billion of their own money back. Not a bank, not a hedge fund, BlackRock. And in the 90 days since, 8 of the biggest private credit funds on Wall Street have quietly done the same thing. Blackstone, Apollo, Ares, Blue Owl, all of them gating withdrawals at the exact same time. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. Here is where this turns from an industry story into your story. Because while that system is locking investors out, the US government is finalizing a rule that would push this exact asset class directly into your 401k. $9 trillion of American retirement money, about to get routed into funds that, right now, today, are refusing to give people back what they already put in. And most people are missing this because nobody is calling it what it actually is. It is not a crash. It is not a crisis. It is quieter than that. This is a run on a system that does not have the word bank on the door, but is built exactly like one. What happens next is the real story. To understand what is happening now, you have to see the timeline. This did not start in March. It started on August 7th, 2025. That is the day Trump signed an executive order called Democratizing Access to Alternative Assets for 401k Investors. In plain English, it cleared the regulatory path for private credit, private equity, and crypto to enter the $9 trillion sitting in American retirement accounts. At that moment, the system looked healthy. Private credit was a $2 trillion machine, growing faster than the banks it was replacing. Bitcoin at 118,000, confidence everywhere. 8 months later, the picture is unrecognizable. Bitcoin is down 43%. Private equity returns sit at a 16-year low. In private credit, the exact asset class this rule is designed to route retirement money into, is the sector now gating withdrawals. Here's what most people are missing. Trump signed the order when the system looked strong. The Labor Department is finalizing the rule right now, while the cracks are forming in real time. Policy is moving in one direction, reality is moving in the other, which leaves the one question nobody is asking loud enough. If the most sophisticated investors on earth are trying to get out of these funds, why is the government working this hard to push your money in? That is where the real story begins. Here's exactly what happened, in order. March 6th, 2026. BlackRock's HPS Corporate Lending Fund, a $26 billion private credit vehicle, receives withdrawal requests equal to 9.3% of its shares. Investors asked for roughly $1.2 billion back. BlackRock capped the payout at 5%. About $620 million went out. The rest stayed locked. Same week, the same thing starts happening everywhere. Blackstone's flagship private credit fund, $82 billion in size, sees record redemption pressure at 7.9%. Apollo's fund, 11.2% requested, capped at 5%. Ares, 11.6%. And then, Blue Owl's technology-focused fund reports the number that should have stopped the news cycle cold. 41% of investors tried to get their money out in a single quarter. 41% in 90 days. The official response from every single manager was identical. This is a retail-driven panic. Institutions are still confident. The headlines do not reflect reality. But this is where the story changes. Days later, BlackRock marked one of its private loans to a company called Infinite Commerce, from 100 cents on the dollar down to zero. Not a markdown, a total wipeout. If you are listening to this and you have never heard those fund names before, that is the whole problem. The public does not know these institutions exist. The people running them want it that way. And I want to pause for a second and say, if you are getting real value out of this analysis, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel push this kind of data-driven breakdown to more people who need to see it. I will keep going, because the next question is the one that matters. Why are these funds gating now, and what does the gating actually signal about the loans sitting inside them? That is where we are going next. Here is what most people do not understand about private credit. These funds operate exactly like banks. They take money from investors. They lend that money out, long-term, to companies. They earn the spread. Same model a regional bank uses, except for 2 critical differences. Private credit funds do not have FDIC insurance, and the loans on their books are not priced every day the way a public bond is. They are marked quarterly by the fund itself, using models the fund itself designs. Read that again. The lender decides what the loans are worth. That is why the gates matter. When a bank faces a run, it either has the cash or it does not. Transparent, binary. When a private credit fund faces a run, it can quietly cap withdrawals, freeze the mark, and buy itself time. The crisis does not explode, it just grinds. And here is the structural piece that makes this bigger than one asset class. Over the last 3 years, private credit has replaced regional banks as the primary lender to mid-sized American businesses. The companies that employ your neighbors, the company that owns the warehouse down the road, the regional manufacturer, the software firm with 300 employees. When these funds stop lending, and gating is the first sign they are about to, that credit does not come back from the banks. The banks already walked away from that market. There is no backup system. This is not a Wall Street problem that stays on Wall Street. It is a real economy problem dressed up in a Wall Street costume. Now here's what the decision makers are actually thinking. Not what they are saying in earnings calls, but what the structure of their choices tells you. Larry Fink at BlackRock has a problem he cannot say out loud. His firm built the largest private credit franchise on earth by promising institutional clients, pension funds, insurance companies, sovereign wealth funds, that this asset class delivers bank-like returns without bank-like regulation. That pitch only works if redemptions stay manageable. Once the gates come on, the pitch breaks. So he needs a new class of buyer, a buyer who cannot redeem easily, a buyer locked in for decades. That is the 401k. A 58-year-old worker contributing to a target date fund does not pull money out every quarter. He cannot. The money is locked behind tax penalties, employer rules, and retirement timelines. That is not a bug for the private credit industry. That is the entire design. This is the pattern to understand. Every time an illiquid asset class hits a liquidity wall, Wall Street looks for a pool of money that cannot run. In 2005, that pool was municipal pensions, and they ended up holding the worst of the mortgage-backed securities when the music stopped. In 2026, that pool is your 401k. And watch what the sophisticated players are doing while the retail product launches. Institutional clients are quietly asking for their money back. Retail product pipelines are being built. Those two facts together tell you exactly who is supposed to be the exit liquidity and who is supposed to be the entry liquidity. The surface story is that retirement savers are getting access to premium investments. The real story is the opposite. Premium investors are getting access to a new customer who cannot leave. Most analysts stop here. That is the mistake. Because the next question is the one that flips everything. What does the other side of this argument actually say? But the other side tells a different story. And it is not a weak argument. Take it seriously for a minute. The case for putting private credit into 401ks goes like this. For 40 years, the best performing investments in America, the ones that actually built generational wealth, have been private. Private equity, private credit, venture capital. Only the ultra-wealthy and a handful of pension funds had access. The ordinary 401k holder was locked out of the highest returning asset class of their lifetime. This executive order finally breaks that barrier. It democratizes access. It gives the factory worker in Ohio the same toolkit the Yale endowment has used for decades. On paper, that argument has real weight. Yale's endowment has delivered roughly 10% annualized returns over 30 years, and a significant piece of that came from private markets. If a diversified target date fund held just 5 to 10% in private credit, the long-term math for a retirement saver genuinely could improve. The defenders also point out, correctly, that the gating mechanism is working as designed. These funds were never promised as daily liquid. The caps are what prevent a fire sale that would destroy value for everyone who stays in. So what looks like a run, they argue, is actually the safety valve functioning correctly. Here is where that argument breaks. It assumes the current stress is temporary. That assumption is doing all the work. Because private credit default rates are now 9.2%, above the 2008 peak, this is not a liquidity wobble. It is credit deterioration underneath the liquidity wobble. Yale got private market returns during a 40-year credit expansion. The 401k saver is being handed the same asset class at the tail end of that cycle, not the beginning. Same asset, completely different entry point. That gap is the entire game. Before we go into what this actually means for your money, do me one favor. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, subscribe. I publish one of these breakdowns every week, and the next one is already in research. Okay, let's talk about your wallet. Now let me connect this directly to your money. 3 pressure points. All of them are moving right now. Pressure point 1, your 401k. If you are contributing to a target date fund through your employer, the most common retirement vehicle in America, you need to know this. The Labor Department's proposed rule specifically names target date funds as the primary vehicle for private credit exposure. You will not get a pop-up asking for consent. The allocation will happen inside the fund, and the notice will be a line in a document most people never open. If you have not logged into your 401k portal in the last year, that is step 1 this weekend. Know what you actually own. Pressure point 2, your borrowing costs. When private credit funds stop lending, mid-sized businesses do not disappear. They turn to whatever credit is left, and that credit is more expensive. Small business loan rates are already running 200 to 300 basis points above where they were 2 years ago. When the second wave of this squeeze hits, and the pattern says it will hit within 90 to 180 days of major gate activity, those rates climb again. That flows into the cost of everything the business you work for pays for, which flows into layoff risk, which flows into the job you currently have. Pressure point 3, your deposits. Here is the quiet one. Regional banks have been losing deposits to money market funds for 2 years straight. That flight started after Silicon Valley Bank. It never stopped. If you bank with a regional lender and your deposits are over the $250,000 FDIC insurance limit, the math on that account changed this year. I am not telling you what to do with that money. I am telling you the structure of the risk has shifted, and most depositors have not updated their mental model since 2023. One viewer writing me an email this week said, "I had no idea my 401k could be touched by any of this." That is not a dumb question. That is the system working exactly as designed, to keep you from asking it. If this is landing, drop a comment below telling me what part of the impact hit hardest for you. I read them. It shapes what I cover next. Here is how I see this playing out. 2 scenarios. Both are live right now. Short term, the next 30 to 60 days. The escalation path. The Labor Department finalizes the 401k rule on the current timeline. At the same time, at least 2 more major private credit funds gate withdrawals. That is, the pattern pressure from Q1 carrying into Q2. The gap between policy and reality becomes visible enough that a few senators start making noise publicly. Warren is already there. Others follow. But the rule goes through anyway, because the political machinery around it was built before the cracks showed, and bureaucracies do not reverse on a dime. Midterm, the next 3 to 6 months, the de-escalation path. The industry buys itself time. BlackRock, Blackstone, Apollo inject their own capital to cover redemptions. Blackstone already put $400 million into BCRED, and that playbook gets repeated. Defaults plateau around the 9% line instead of climbing. The news cycle moves on. The 401k rule activates quietly in late summer. By the time ordinary workers notice private credit is inside their target date funds, it will already be there. Here is my honest read, and you asked for the opinion, so here it is. I do not think this ends in a 2008-style explosion. The gating mechanism specifically prevents that. This ends as a slow bleed, the kind of loss that shows up in quarterly statements 3 years from now, when a retiring worker opens his portfolio and finds out his target date fund returned 4% when public markets returned 9%. No headline, no crash, just a gap. And by the time he notices, the managers who engineered the exposure have already collected their fees. The people calling this a bank run are half right. It is a run. It is just the slowest one in financial history, measured in years, not days. And you are watching it happen in real time, whether the headlines call it that or not. One last thing. If you made it this far, you are the 12% who actually watches these all the way through, and you are the reason I can keep making them instead of the 10-minute outrage clips the algorithm prefers. Share this with one person who has a 401k. That is the only ask. One person. The next Reid briefing drops in 7 days. I will see you there.